My name is Brian Frazier, and I write under the pen name Darius Blackman. Today, I want to talk about my book, Built for Pressure: How Men Stay Calm, Finish Strong, and Hold the Line Under Stress. This book is part of the Darius Blackman Standards series, and it was written for men who are trying to become stronger where it actually matters, not louder, not harder for show, not more aggressive just to look like they have control, but calmer, steadier, more reliable, more useful when life gets heavy. One of the first lines in the book is simple: pressure tells the truth. That is the foundation of this book. Pressure tells the truth about your habits. It tells the truth about your emotional control. It tells the truth about your limits, your standards, your weak spots, and your excuses. A man can look strong when life is smooth. He can look disciplined when nothing costly is being asked of him. He can look focused when there is no real weight on his shoulders. Then pressure arrives, money gets tight, work gets heavy, people need more from him, sleep gets weaker, conflict enters, a setback hits, and suddenly the truth comes out. That is not punishment, that is revelation. This book was shaped by what I have learned over the last 22 years serving my country. I have spent a large part of my life in environments where pressure was not theory, it was real, it was constant, it was tied to leadership, discipline, patience, responsibility, and the ability to stay useful when things were not easy. And one thing I learned is this: pressure strips performance fast. It does not care about image. It does not care about speeches. It does not care how hard a man looks when the room is comfortable. It cares whether he can think, whether he can stay composed, whether he can keep his word, whether he can remain useful when people, problems, fatigue, and responsibility all arrive at once. That is the kind of strength I wanted to write about. Now, I also want to explain something important about the cover and the images used for this book series. Some people may see the younger image of me on the covers and wonder why I chose that. The reason is simple. When I was writing these books, I kept thinking about the younger version of myself. I kept thinking, I wish I had known some of this earlier. Hindsight is always 2020, and wisdom is gained through years, mistakes, correction, responsibility, and pressure. There are lessons I understand now because life taught them to me the hard way. There are things I know now because leadership demanded them from me. There are things I had to learn through failure, through pressure, through service, through carrying weight, and through trying to become the kind of man other people could count on. So I used the younger image because these books are written for that younger version of me. They are written for the young man who has potential but does not yet have structure. The young man who wants purpose but keeps drifting. The young man who wants respect but has not yet built the habits that create it. The young man who wants to be strong but has been taught to perform toughness instead of building real steadiness. These books are for him. They are for the young men I have led, mentored, corrected, encouraged, and watched struggle to find their footing. They are for the young men who may not have someone in their corner telling them the truth in a direct way. And they are also for the young women I have led because the lessons of discipline, pressure, leadership, responsibility, and standards are not limited to men alone. But this series speaks directly to men because I have seen too many men confuse noise for strength. And Built for Pressure says something different. The book says, loud is cheap, panic is expensive, overreaction spreads damage, and composure is worth more than most men realize. That is one of the main messages. A lot of men have been taught that toughness means intensity. They think being strong means being angry. They think leadership means being loud. They think pressure means they have to prove something every second. But real pressure exposes all of that. The book says real male strength is often quieter. It is calm under pressure, clear under stress, controlled in conflict, steady after setbacks, dependable when other men start unraveling. That is the kind of man this book is trying to build, not a man who pretends he never feels pressure, not a man who acts like he never gets tired, not a man who has to perform being unbreakable, but a man who is better governed, a man who can slow himself down, a man who can think before he speaks, a man who can carry weight without spreading chaos, a man who can take a hit without letting the hit take his whole structure. That matters because a lot of men do not fall apart from one hard moment. They fall apart because too much has been stacking for too long. Poor sleep, weak recovery, money stress, work pressure, emotional fatigue, conflict, pride, unspoken resentment, no real reset, no real system. Then one more thing hits, and they think that one thing broke them. But the truth is, the breaking point usually had a trail. That is why this book does not just talk about being tough. It talks about studying pressure. One of the lines says, "Pressure is not only something to survive, it is something to study." That is important because when pressure hits, most men only ask, "Why is this happening to me?" But a stronger question is, "What is this pressure showing me about the man I still need to build?" That question changes everything. Now, pressure is not just pain. It becomes information. It becomes a mirror. It shows you where your habits are weak. It shows you where your anger is too quick. It shows you where your speech gets loose. It shows you where fatigue controls you. It shows you where you are still performing toughness instead of living with real control. And I want to be clear about something. I did not write this book because I am perfect. I am by no means perfect. I have struggled to uphold standards myself. I have had moments where I did not respond the way I should have. I have had to learn patience. I have had to learn discipline. I have had to learn how to carry responsibility without allowing pressure to make me worse. But that is exactly why I believe in standards. Because when I have lived by them, my life has been better. When I have honored them, I have been stronger. When I have returned to them after falling short, I have become more grounded. That is the point. A standard does not mean you never struggle. It means you have something to return to. Built for Pressure says, a setback is an event. A collapse is a response pattern. That line matters because life is going to hit everybody. Plans fall apart. Money gets tight. Relationships change. Work gets heavy. Mistakes cost more than expected. Opportunities close. That is life. But a setback does not have to become a collapse. The event may be painful. It may be frustrating. It may even be unfair. But after the event, a man still has choices. He can tell the truth. He can assess the damage. He can protect the basics. He can regroup. He can return or he can spiral. He can dramatize. He can abandon standards. He can disappear into distraction. He can let one failure become five. That second pattern is what turns a setback into a collapse. And I have seen too many men lose themselves there, not because they were weak at the core, but because they did not have a recovery standard. They did not know how to come back cleanly. They let shame multiply the damage. They let embarrassment turn into avoidance. They let one bad week become a whole identity. So this book is about learning to return, return to calm, return to clarity, return to responsibility, return to the standard. Another line from the book says, calm is a weapon. That does not mean calm is soft. It does not mean passive. It does not mean you do not care. Calm means your urgency stays under command. A calm man can act fast. He can be decisive. He can be forceful when necessary, but he is not being run by panic. That is the difference. Calm protects clarity. Calm protects speech. Calm protects judgment. Calm keeps a man from adding chaos to the problem. And that is one of the biggest things I have learned through leadership. When pressure is high, people do not need you to perform. They need you to be useful. They need calm. They need clarity. They need direction. They need someone who can stand in the middle of the moment and not make it worse. That is why the book says, under pressure, usefulness matters more than image. That is a lesson I hope young men understand early. You do not have to look like the toughest person in the room. You do not have to talk the loudest. You do not have to prove every emotion. You do not have to turn every hard thing into a performance. Can you stay useful? Can you keep your word? Can you protect your standards when conditions stop helping you? Can people count on you when it gets hard? That is the question. And that brings me back to why I wrote this series. At the end of the day, I have always wanted my career to have impact, not just titles, not just positions, not just time served, impact. I want the young men and women I have led to remember the lessons I tried to teach them. I want them to remember that standards matter. I want them to remember that responsibility matters. I want them to remember that calm matters. I want them to remember that how you carry yourself under pressure says something about who you are becoming. These books are my attempt to broaden that reach, to take the lessons I have learned through 22 years of service, leadership, failure, correction, growth, patience, pressure, and discipline, and put them into something that can reach somebody I may never meet. A young man may pick this book up at the right time. He may see himself in it. He may realize that he does not need to keep drifting. He may realize that fake toughness is not the goal. He may realize that discipline is not about pretending to be perfect. It is about becoming dependable. It is about becoming harder to shake. It is about becoming the kind of man pressure can test without taking him out of himself. The book says, reliability is a form of love. That line is important to me because reliability is not just practical, it affects people. When you are reliable, the people around you feel it. Your family feels it, your team feels it, your friends feel it, the people you lead feel it. They feel safer, they feel calmer, they feel less burdened, they feel less like they have to guess who you are going to be when life gets hard. That is real leadership. That is real strength, not image, not performance, reliability. The book also says urgency does not cancel standards. That is another lesson men need to hear. Just because life gets tight does not mean you get to become sloppy. Work urgency is not permission to become scattered. Money urgency is not permission to become reckless. Conflict urgency is not permission to say things you cannot take back. Pressure will always try to rush a man into worse behavior. That is why standards matter more when life gets hard, not less. The standard has to be decided before the moment. The book says, a standard decides before the moment does. That is why a man needs a code, a simple code, something he can remember when he is tired, something he can reach for when he is angry, something that keeps him from negotiating with every mood, every emotion, every excuse, and every pressure point. For me, the code is simple. Tell the truth fast, protect the basics, keep your word, slow down before you speak, reduce damage quickly, do not perform, function, return without drama. That is the kind of code I hope this book helps men build, because self-trust is not built through noise. It is built through evidence. Every time you obey a real standard under pressure, something strengthens inside you. You start to believe, I can be counted on. I can return after a bad day. I can hold my line without drama. I can stay more like myself when life gets heavy. That kind of belief is earned. And once a man earns it, he moves differently. He speaks differently. He leads differently. He carries himself differently. So when people see the younger image of me on the cover, I want them to understand what they are really looking at. They are looking at the man I was trying to reach, the younger man who needed these lessons, the younger man who did not yet understand all the weight that would come later, the younger man who had potential but still needed structure, the younger man who needed somebody to say, calm down, tighten up, keep your word, stop performing, and build the standard now. That is who this book is for. It is for that younger version of me. And it is for every young man standing in that same place today. If this book reaches one young man at the right time and helps him choose discipline over drift, calm over chaos, standards over excuses, then it has done what I hoped it would do. Again, my name is Brian Fraser. I write under the pen name Darius Blackman. This is Built for Pressure. Stay calm, finish strong, hold the line under stress, and as the book says near the end, stay with the build.